The stars shimmered quietly over the Zorvath sector, a lawless and war-torn region controlled by the brutal Vrax dominion. For centuries, the Vrax had ruled with an iron fist, expanding their empire through sheer military strength, crushing weaker species without mercy. They saw themselves as invincible, the ultimate power in the galaxy. And why wouldn't they? No species had ever stood against them and survived. They had conquered dozens of worlds, reduced fleets to burning wreckage, and turned entire civilizations into their slaves. When their warlords declared humanity as their next target, there had been laughter in the Vraxian war councils. Humans were a minor species, primitive and insignificant. Their fleets were small, their colonies few. The idea that they could resist the Dominion was absurd. But that belief shattered the moment the Hurricane-class battleship TSF Tempest emerged from a violent slipstream rupture at the edge of their territory. It was unlike anything the Vrax had ever seen. Their warships were built for intimidation, huge, spiked monstrosities covered in crude armor, their weapons designed for sheer destructive power. But Tempest was different. Its dark, metallic hull absorbed the light of distant stars, its sleek design more reminiscent of a predator than a war machine. It didn't need to look terrifying. It simply was. At over 3 kilometers in length, it dwarfed the surrounding vessels. Its advanced thrusters burned with eerie blue fire, silent and deadly. But it was the energy signatures that sent fear rippling through the Vraxian command channels. No battleship, no dreadnought, not even a planetary defense system had ever produced readings like this. Tempest was something new, something terrifying. The Vraxian fleet stationed in the sector reacted immediately. Alarms blared across their warships as thousands of fighters and cruisers moved into formation. Their commander, High Warlord Krezak, sat in his throne-like command chair aboard the Doomfang, the largest dreadnought in the system. His red eyes narrowed as he studied the single Terran warship on the holoscreen. One ship? That was all the humans had sent? His mandibles twitched in amusement. Either humanity was more foolish than he had thought, or this was some kind of pathetic diplomatic gesture. Either way, it didn't matter. He activated the sector-wide communication channel, his voice a deep, guttural growl. Humans, you stand in Vraxian space. Surrender your vessel and accept your place beneath the Dominion, or be annihilated. For a moment, there was silence. Then a response came through, spoken in a calm, mechanical voice. Humanity arrives. The storm begins. Without warning, Tempest Move.it was unlike any warship movement the Vrax had ever witnessed. Instead of slowly accelerating like their heavy dreadnoughts, the massive Terran battleship surged forward with instantaneous speed, its thrusters barely leaving a trace. In seconds, it was already among them. And then the first strike came. A graviton lance, a weapon never before seen in the galaxy, fired from the forward cannons, sending a beam of condensed gravitational force straight through the heart of a Vraxian warcruiser. The ship didn't explode, it collapsed in on itself, crushed by forces beyond comprehension. Screams filled the communication channels as more lances fired in rapid succession, cutting through the fleet like a scythe through grass. Entire squadrons disappeared before they could even return fire. The Vrax had expected a battle. Instead, they found themselves in a slaughter. Doomfang's bridge was in chaos. Krezak bellowed orders, demanding his fleet to counterattack, but it was no use. Every time their weapons locked onto Tempest, it wasn't there anymore. It danced through space with impossible agility, using short-range warp jumps to reposition itself faster than their targeting systems could track. Plasma torpedoes and energy cannons fired blindly into the void, hitting nothing but the debris of their own ships. And then the second wave of destruction began. Tempest activated its cyclonic shields, a defensive technology so advanced that enemy fire didn't just get absorbed, it was redirected. The dreadnought Doomfang fired its primary mass driver cannon, a weapon that could crack a moon in half. The shot hit Tempest's shield, and then, as if guided by a malevolent force, reversed course, slamming back into the Doomfang's own hull. The resulting explosion tore through multiple decks, sending debris and crew members spiraling into space. Panic spread through the Vrak's ranks as ship after ship was destroyed by their own attacks. This is impossible, Krezak roared, his claws digging into the armrests of his chair. His mind refused to believe what he was seeing. He had led conquests against dozens of species, crushed fleets larger than this. But now, in a matter of minutes, his forces were being obliterated by a single Terran warship. The battle lasted 3 minutes. When the last Vraxian ship attempted to flee, Tempest fired a railgun barrage, sending hyperdense projectiles at nearly light speed. The ships didn't just explode, they ceased to exist, shattered into molecular dust. The few survivors that remained drifted helplessly, their vessels burning, their weapons useless. Then, across all Vraxian communication channels, a final message was sent from Tempest. This was a warning. The storm has only begun. And with that, the Terran warship vanished into the void, leaving behind only wreckage, silence, and the terrifying realization that the Vrak's dominion had just made the greatest mistake in its history. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The ruins of the Vraxian fleet still drifted in the cold void of space, silent proof that the impossible had just happened. A single human warship, the Hurricane-class battleship TSF Tempest, had destroyed an entire battle fleet in minutes. The surviving Vraxian vessels, crippled and broken, had fled to the nearest command station, carrying with them a message of horror. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not prey. The storm had come, and it would not stop. Across the Dominion, warlords and strategists gathered in urgent councils, their pride wounded, their confidence shaken. Never before had they suffered such a loss, especially not at the hands of an enemy they had mocked. But the Vraks were not a species to surrender easily. Their empire had been built on war, their legacy forged in conquest. If humanity wanted a war, they would give them one. High Warlord Krozar, one of the most ruthless commanders of the Dominion, was given direct orders to eliminate Tempest at any cost. Within hours, the largest Vraxian fleet ever assembled for a single mission was deployed. More than 2,000 warships, including dreadnoughts and planetary siege cruisers, moved toward the last known location of Tempest. Every ship was armed with the deadliest weapons in the Dominion's arsenal. The fleet spread across the sector, covering every possible escape route, ensuring that the Terran warship would be trapped. The Vraks did not just want to destroy Tempest, they wanted to make an example of it, to erase the humiliation of their defeat. Deep within the command bridge of his personal warship, Bloodfang Krozar watched the fleet's movements with cold satisfaction. He had fought in countless battles, conquered entire star systems, and crushed rebellions with merciless efficiency. The humans had caught them off guard once, but this time they would not escape. He had studied the battle reports, analyzed every movement Tempest had made. The ship was fast, its weapons devastating, but it was still just one ship. It could not fight a war alone. "No more games," Krozar growled, his voice a deep, guttural snarl. "Find it. Destroy it." As if answering his challenge, alarms blared across the fleet. Sensors detected a sudden disturbance, a gravitational anomaly, rapidly forming at the heart of the fleet. It was the same signal from before, the same rift that had announced Tempest's arrival. "Brace for engagement." The ship commanders roared through the comms, ordering all weapons to be locked onto the anomaly. Fighters scrambled from their hangars, defensive formations shifted, and targeting systems primed their most powerful weapons. The moment Tempest emerged, they would unleash everything. The anomaly grew larger, the very fabric of space bending under unseen forces. But before the fleet could react, the gravitational rift collapsed inward, and Tempest was not where they expected. A pulse of blue energy erupted behind the fleet, and Tempest was suddenly there, bypassing their entire formation in an instant. Before the Vraks could adjust, the battleship struck. Its graviton lances, weapons so advanced that they ignored traditional shields and armor, fired in rapid succession. Beams of condensed gravitational force ripped through warships like paper, crumpling hulls, crushing engines, and imploding command bridges. A dreadnought 3 times the size of Tempest was torn apart in seconds as the ship's core was forcibly compacted into the size of a fist. Thousands of Vraxian soldiers never even had time to scream before their vessels collapsed into nothingness. The Vrax retaliated, firing plasma torpedoes, ion cannons, and kinetic railguns, filling space with deadly firepower. But Tempest moved like a phantom, phase-jumping between locations faster than their targeting systems could keep up. The ship's cyclonic shields, an experimental defensive barrier, absorbed and redirected enemy fire, sending deadly plasma storms back at the attackers. A formation of Vraxian warcruisers attempted to flank the Terran battleship, hoping to overwhelm it with concentrated fire. But Tempest anticipated the maneuver. It deployed Hurricane drones, advanced AI-controlled attack units that swarmed through the fleet, weaving between enemy ships with terrifying precision. Each drone was armed with neutron disruptors, weapons designed to pierce even the most advanced shielding. Within moments, entire squadrons of Vraxian fighters were vaporized, their ships exploding in rapid succession. On the bridge of Bloodfang, Crozar watched in growing horror. This was not war. This was slaughter. His fleet, the greatest force ever gathered, was being torn apart by a single human warship. It defied every military principle, every strategy he had ever known. The Dominion's fleets had conquered hundreds of civilizations. How could one ship be doing this to them? Desperation took hold. Concentrate all firepower. Crozar roared, slamming his fists against the control panel. His flagship's Apocalypse cannon, a weapon capable of reducing a planet's surface to molten rock charged with raw energy. It fired, unleashing a crimson beam of destruction aimed directly at Tempest. But the moment it fired, the Terran warship vanished in a burst of blue light. The cannon shot continued forward directly into the heart of the Vraxian fleet. The result was catastrophic. Dozens of ships were caught in the blast, their hulls melting, disintegrating, vanishing in an instant. The shockwave sent smaller vessels spiraling out of control, crashing into one another in a chain reaction of explosions. In mere seconds, half the fleet was gone. And then, Tempest reappeared. This time, it was directly above Bloodfang. A moment later, the ship's primary railguns activated. 5 hyperdense slugs, moving at nearly light speed, tore through the Vraxian flagship like a dagger through flesh. Explosions erupted across its structure as the warship's core detonated from within. Crozar barely had time to process what had happened before the flames consumed him. Bloodfang, the pride of the Dominion, was reduced to a drifting, burning husk. The remaining Vraxian ships broke formation. Their commanders, once loyal warriors, made the only choice left. They fled. The battle was over. The greatest fleet the Vrax had ever assembled had been annihilated in under 5 minutes. Across the remains of the battlefield, the lone survivor, Tempest, drifted silently, watching. The Terran warship did not chase the fleeing vessels. It didn't need to. A message had been delivered, one that would spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity was no longer a minor species. Humanity was no longer weak. The storm had arrived, and nothing would stop it. The Vrax Dominion was in chaos. The news of the massacre spread like wildfire, reaching every war council, every command center, every stronghold across their vast empire. The destruction of the largest Vraxian fleet in history was not just a defeat, it was a warning. Humanity had arrived, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. The Terran warship TSF Tempest had shattered every assumption about human weakness. It had slaughtered thousands of elite warriors, destroyed dreadnoughts with ease, and humiliated the Dominion's greatest commanders. But the worst part wasn't just the loss, it was the fear. The Vrax had built their empire through intimidation, breaking their enemies before a single shot was fired. Now, for the first time in centuries, they were the ones who felt true terror. The High Warlords convened in a secret war chamber on Zorvath Prime, the capital world of the Dominion. The tension in the massive, darkened hall was suffocating. Normally, warlords spoke with arrogance, boasting about their victories and conquests. Now, they whispered in hushed tones, their voices laced with uncertainty. At the head of the council sat Overlord Exelkar, the supreme ruler of the Dominion. His massive figure loomed over the others, his dark crimson armor reflecting the dim light of the chamber. His reptilian eyes burned with rage as he listened to the frantic reports from his surviving officers. "This cannot be real," one warlord growled, his claws gripping the table. "One human warship did this? It is not possible." "It is real," another spat. "You saw the battle records. Our fleet was wiped out in minutes. They used weapons we do not understand. Their defenses are beyond anything we have ever encountered. We must prepare for silence." Overlord Excelker's voice cut through the room like a blade. The warlords immediately fell quiet. His gaze hardened. "We underestimated the humans. That will not happen again. We must act before this tempest reaches our core worlds." His claws tapped against the table, his mind racing. The first planet to fall was Drakvos, a fortress world, home to millions of Vraxian soldiers, equipped with planetary defense cannons and a fleet of warships. It was supposed to be impenetrable. But when Tempest arrived, everything changed. The entire planetary defense grid collapsed within seconds. Terran pulse disruptors, advanced electronic warfare systems, shut down every targeting system, every shield, every weapon. Before the Vrax could even fire a shot, they were already blind. And then came the bombardment. Hypervelocity railguns fired from orbit, sending slugs at near light speed directly into critical military targets. Weapons depots, command centers, energy stations, each one was obliterated in a single strike. The planet's fleet tried to retaliate, but Tempest moved like a ghost, phasing in and out of detection, appearing in different locations faster than any Vraxian vessel could track. Within minutes, the skies were filled with nothing but burning wreckage. The Vrax on the ground, soldiers bred for war, warriors who had never tasted fear, surrendered without a fight. The same pattern repeated across multiple worlds. Vorek, Jexis, Kelvath Prime. One after another, planets fell to the unstoppable march of the Terran fleet. And it wasn't just Tempest anymore. Humanity had arrived in full force. Terran Storm-class cruisers, smaller but just as lethal, spread across Vraxian space, systematically dismantling every stronghold, every military installation. Terran shock troops, equipped with power armor and kinetic shields, stormed through enemy defenses like an unstoppable tide. No fortification could hold them back. No army could resist them. The humans fought with terrifying precision, efficient, cold, methodical. They did not conquer for resources. They did not enslave. They simply erased every trace of the Dominion's rule. The galaxy had never seen a war like this. The Vraxian people, once proud and unyielding, were now begging for mercy. Entire cities were abandoned, civilians fleeing in desperation as human forces advanced. War fleets scattered, their commanders deserting their posts rather than face the wrath of the storm. Even warlords, once fearless rulers, began to flee to the edges of the galaxy, seeking sanctuary in neutral territories. And yet, Tempest did not stop. It pushed deeper and deeper into the Dominion, cutting through defenses like a blade through flesh. Every battle ended the same way: total annihilation. Every attempt to resist was met with merciless efficiency. And then, at last, the storm reached Zorvath Prime. The capital world of the Dominion, the very heart of the Empire, once the symbol of Vraxian power, now stood alone. The once mighty fleets that had protected it were gone. The warlords had vanished. The defenses that had once been unbreakable were silent. And in the darkened sky above the city, Tempest arrived. Alone, on the surface, Overlord Excelkar watched in disbelief. He had prepared for a final battle, had ordered every remaining soldier to stand their ground. But as he looked around, he saw the truth. His people, his warriors, were terrified. Some had already dropped their weapons, surrendering before the battle had even begun. Others had fled into the shadows, hoping to escape the inevitable. The Dominion, his empire, the legacy of his ancestors, was gone. And then the message came. This is the Terran Storm Fleet. Your rule ends today. The Overlord clenched his fists, his claws drawing blood. He had always believed in power, in dominance, in the strength of the Dominion. But now, standing beneath the looming shadow of Tempest, he understood the truth. Humanity had not come to conquer. They had come to destroy. The storm had arrived, and nothing could stop it. The skies above Zorvath Prime burned. The capital of the Dominion, the heart of Vraxian rule, once untouchable, was now a battlefield. Fires raged across the towering citadels, thick black smoke rising like funeral pyres. Explosions thundered in the distance as Terran forces swept through the city, eliminating the last remnants of resistance. Above, the storm had arrived. The TSF Tempest, the warship that had single-handedly shattered the Dominion's fleets, hung over the city like an executioner's blade. Smaller Terran vessels darted through the skies, surgically striking enemy strongholds, dismantling every last line of defense. It was not a battle anymore. It was the end. Deep within the Imperial War Palace, Overlord Exelkar stood before the Great War Map, his claws digging into the edges of the table. The holoprojector flickered, displaying the carnage unfolding across the planet. His warlords, those who had not fled, stood beside him. The Dominion had never known fear. They had ruled with absolute power, crushed rebellions with ease, erased civilizations without hesitation. But now, standing at the edge of their own extinction, they understood the terror they had once inflicted upon others. Zelkar's eyes locked onto the incoming human fleet, his mind racing. He had seen great wars, had led campaigns across 100 worlds, but never had he faced an enemy like this. The Terrans did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for territory, for resources, or for power. They fought to end the Dominion, to wipe it from existence. He had underestimated them. The entire Dominion had, and now it was too late. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the war chamber, cutting through the silence. Overlord Exelkar. The warlords stiffened. Every eye turned toward the holoprojector as a figure materialized. It was not a Vraxian. It was not even a physical presence. It was the face of the storm. Fleet Admiral Elara Vos, commander of the Terran Storm Fleet, stared at them from the projection. Her expression was unreadable, her steel-gray eyes locked onto Exelkar with unyielding intensity. She was the architect of their downfall. The mind behind the strategy, the force that had broken their empire, the woman who had turned the unstoppable Dominion into nothing more than a fading memory. "Your fleets are destroyed," she said, her voice calm, emotionless. "Your armies are in retreat. Your capital is burning." She leaned forward slightly, the glow of the holoprojector casting sharp shadows across her face. "You have two choices, Overlord. Surrender and stand trial for your crimes, or die with your empire." Zelkar's claws curled into a fist. The warlords beside him shifted uncomfortably, some exchanging glances, some already considering the offer. Weaklings. Cowards. He could smell their fear, the pathetic scent of defeat clinging to them like rot. His empire was crumbling, and they wanted to beg for mercy? No. If the Dominion was to fall, it would fall in battle. It would not kneel. A deep growl rumbled in his throat as he slammed his fist onto the table. "You think you've won, human?" His voice was sharp, filled with a venomous rage. "You think we will kneel before you?" His reptilian eyes narrowed, burning with defiance. "I would rather see this world turn to ash than surrender to your kind." Admiral Vos remained silent for a moment, studying him. Then, with a slight tilt of her head, she uttered a single word. "Understood." The transmission cut off instantly. And then the sky fell. Above Zorvath Prime, Tempest moved into position. It had held back until now, allowing ground forces to take the city, giving the Dominion one last chance to surrender. But the choice had been made. There would be no surrender. The orbital bombardment began. The first strike came in the form of kinetic rods, massive tungsten projectiles fired from orbit, moving at hypersonic speeds. The impact shattered entire city blocks, creating craters that swallowed buildings whole. Shockwaves rippled through the capital, toppling ancient towers, reducing the once mighty war palaces to rubble. The Vraxian strongholds, once symbols of power, were torn apart in seconds. Selkir watched in stunned silence as the war chamber trembled, dust and debris raining from the ceiling. His warlords shouted in panic, some running for escape routes, others frozen in terror. This was not war. This was annihilation. The palace shook violently as another kinetic strike hit. Columns collapsed, walls cracked, alarms blared. Zelker stumbled, his vision blurring from the sheer force of the destruction. His empire, his legacy, everything he had built gone in mere moments. A final, deafening explosion ripped through the palace. The last thing Exelkar saw before the darkness swallowed him was the sky itself burning. Hours later, the dust had settled. The fires still raged, but there was no more resistance. Terran forces moved methodically through the ruins, clearing the last remnants of Dominion rule. The storm had passed, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Above the planet, Tempest remained motionless, a silent sentinel over the grave of an empire. On the bridge, Admiral Vose stood with her officers, watching the final reports come in. Zorvath Prime had fallen. The Dominion was no more. A young officer approached, his face tense. "Ma'am, we've confirmed the Overlord's death. There were no survivors in the palace." Vose gave a slow nod. "Understood." There was no triumph in her voice. No celebration. The storm had ended. But another would come. It always did. The war was over. The Vrax Dominion, once the most feared empire in the galaxy, was now nothing but ruins and memories. Their fleets lay shattered across space, their capital world burned, their warlords dead or in chains. The Dominion had ruled through fear, crushing civilizations beneath its might for centuries. And yet, in mere weeks, it had been erased from existence. Humanity had not come as conquerors. They had come as executioners. They had rewritten the balance of power. From the bridge of the TSF Tempest, Admiral Alara Vose gazed down at Zorvath Prime, the former heart of the Dominion. Fires still raged across the once mighty cityscape. Smoke coiled into the heavens like the dying breath of an empire. Terran warships hovered in formation, their dark hulls casting long shadows over the ruins below. Ground forces moved through the remains of the capital, ensuring no remnants of resistance remained. There were no more battles to fight, no more fleets to destroy, and yet Vose felt no satisfaction. Victory should have brought relief. Instead, it brought a question: what came next? Humanity had not fought for conquest. They had fought for survival, striking back against the Vrax for the years of suffering, the massacres, the enslavement of human colonies. But now the war was done, and the galaxy was watching. Dozens of alien races had observed the war unfold, first in disbelief, then in horror. The unstoppable Terran fleet had wiped an empire off the map in mere weeks. Some had hoped humanity would stop after the Vrax were gone. Others feared the truth. This was just the beginning. On the command deck, a young officer approached. "Ma'am, we've received transmissions from the neutral systems. They want to open negotiations." Vose barely reacted. Of course they did. The moment the Dominion fell, the power vacuum had begun to form. There had to be order, or the galaxy would collapse into chaos. She turned toward the holographic war table, where a projection of the galaxy flickered. The Dominion's former territory, once a vast stretch of space, was now nothing but a scattered, lawless void. Pirates, mercenary fleets, warlords from within and outside the Dominion were already moving in, preying on the defenseless. And then there were the other major powers: the Zircani Commonwealth, the Troxian hegemony, the Yuri Ascendancy nations that had once feared the Dominion but now feared humanity even more. "Any messages from the Commonwealth?" Vose asked, referring to the largest remaining power in the region. "They want assurances," the officer replied. "They want to know what happens next." Vose exhaled slowly. That was the real question, wasn't it? What did happen next? Humanity had struck out against the Dominion to end tyranny, but if they simply left now, the same chaos that had once allowed the Vrax to rise would only repeat itself. Someone had to bring stability. Someone had to take control. and there was only one force in the galaxy strong enough to do it. Her gaze hardened as she looked at the map. "Prepare a broadcast." The officer hesitated. "To whom, Admiral?" "To everyone." Moments later, across the galaxy, every major communications channel was interrupted. Screens flickered to life, transmissions hijacked by a single message. Across hundreds of worlds, from the shattered ruins of former Dominion strongholds to the shining capital cities of neutral powers, one figure appeared on the screens: Admiral Elara Vos. She stood tall, her uniform crisp, her expression calm but unyielding. Behind her, the symbol of the Terran Fleet Command glowed, and through the massive viewport behind her, the ruins of Zorvath Prime were visible, a silent testament to humanity's power. "This is Admiral Elara Vos of the Terran Storm Fleet," she began, her voice unwavering. "The Vrax Dominion is no more. Their reign of terror has ended. Their fleets are destroyed. Their warlords are dead. The galaxy is free." She let the words sink in before continuing. "But freedom without order is chaos. And we have seen, time and time again, that chaos breeds war, suffering, and the rise of new tyrants. The Dominion's fall has left a void, one that others would seek to fill. Pirates, slavers, warlords, all of them now see an opportunity to carve out power for themselves. We will not allow that." The transmission flickered, showing the might of the Terran fleet, rows of warships, weapons gleaming in the void. The image changed again, showing human troops securing Dominion planets, bringing order to lawless territories. "Humanity did not seek conquest," Vos continued. "But we will not stand by and watch the galaxy descend into chaos. The Terran fleet will bring order. We will restore stability, and we will ensure that never again does a power like the Dominion rise to threaten the innocent." Her next words were not a request. They were a declaration. As of this moment, all former Dominion space is under Terran protection. No warlords, no criminals, no foreign powers will claim what is not theirs. The Terran Dominion is born. The words sent a shockwave across the galaxy. In the Zircani Commonwealth, their ruling council watched in stunned silence. Some whispered in fear, others in awe. In the Troxian hegemony, military leaders scrambled to assess the threat, realizing that the power balance had just shifted forever. On the former Dominion worlds, where civilians had braced for anarchy, hope flickered. They had lived under Vraxian tyranny for generations, knowing only oppression and cruelty. And now, a new power had risen, one that had destroyed their masters in mere weeks. Some feared what would come next. Others prayed for a future under the protection of their new overlords. And aboard Tempest, Admiral Vos stood silently as the transmission ended. She knew what she had just done. There was no turning back. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. The Terran Dominion had risen, and nothing would ever be the same again.